Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to episode 4 of Direwolf20's Mod Spotlight on Blood Magic. We have covered a lot of stuff in this mod and there's just a few things left to take a look at. Today's episode I want to show you guys about teleposers. I'd like to upgrade my blood altar to a tier 5. I'd like to introduce you guys to a way to automate some alchemy because you're going to need a lot of automated alchemy for the final piece of this spotlight, which is going to be the custom spell system, which is pretty complicated and pretty awesome. So let's get started playing around with all the features that are available in blood magic. We've just got a few more left to cover and then we'll be wrapped up. Alright guys, let's get started by upgrading our altar to a final version, the tier 5 altar. Now this guy is pretty expensive, I'm not going to lie. It's very expensive, as a matter of fact, to get up to a tier 5 altar, but it's well worth it because it unlocks a lot of cool stuff. First off, you're going to need 13 blood runes on either side, and they need to be exactly 3 blocks away from your current set of blood runes, so the outer edge there, so 1, 2, 3 blocks away, and 1 Y level down. So this guy's at Y level 69, and this guy's at Y level 67, so the blood runes themselves will be at 68, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 on all 4 sides. And you can see I've kind of mapped this out already ahead of time. And then the final set. Now, the last piece of this puzzle are beacons. You're going to need 4 beacons to exist on the corners where this thing intersects. So you can see like right along the edge corner here, and it needs to be 1 block above the current row of blood runes. So this is going to go right here. And you'll note that there's room here to set up a 3x3 system underneath of like iron blocks or gold blocks or whatever you want to put down, so that if you want, you can go ahead and activate these beacons with effects, which is probably a good idea since, you know, you have to place down beacons anyway. You might as well make them useful and do something, right? So regeneration, probably not a bad idea. Alright, so we'll get that going, and if we come over here now, we should see a tier 5 altar. Nice. So that's how you upgrade the altar to the final version, the tier 5. And then in order to get yourself the final blood orb, which is going to be very useful for you, the tier 5 blood orb is going to require one of those demonic blood shards that we got last episode, and 75,000 life points in the altar. So you're going to probably want a lot of augmented upgrade runes, augmented capacities to store lots of life points inside the altar, and that'll get you the tier 5 orb. Nice. And I'm just going to snag one of those guys, and now it's bound to my player the first time I use it. Excellent. So we've got a tier 5 altar. Very cool. Next, I'd like to show you how to automate some alchemy. There is a lot of alchemy that's required for some of the next pieces, so automating it is probably a good idea. So here's a very useful ritual that you guys are going to want to take a look at. It's called the Ballad of Alchemy. Why don't I place down all the blocks I need for it? Dun, 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 dun. As you can see, there's some of those darker stones that you need, so you're definitely going to want to have the tier 4 altar to be able to do this. Next up, you're going to need a couple chests. 1, 2, 3. And those guys are going to go on 3 sides here. And then finally, you want an alchemy table. Cool, alchemic chemistry set. And that's the basic setup for automating alchemy. There's one last thing you need, and that would be a blood altar. That goes right on top of the Master Ritual Stone, like so. Alright, to get this thing working, it's really simple. First, in the blood altar, you want to place whatever item your target is. So whatever you want to make with this automation, you place in the blood altar. So for now, I'd like to make a bunch of simple catalysts because they're very useful and they're used for pretty much all kinds of future stuff that you're going to want to do. So let's get that going. So right-click the simple catalyst into the blood altar. Now the chests on the sides of the blood altar, which is these 2 right here, are going to represent your input chests. Now you can put everything in one chest. They don't have to be chests as long as they're any inventory except for an alchemic chemistry set. That's the only inventory that won't work here. So if you have iron chests, if you have AE system, you can do interfaces. Anything that's basically considered a valid inventory can go here. And then your output chest is going to be one that's opposite from the alchemic chemistry set. So I'm just going to go ahead, take a look here. The simple catalyst requires redstone, sugar, gunpowder, and glowstone. Redstone, sugar, gunpowder, and glowstone. I got everything ready. So I'm just going to drop these guys in here, and this ritual should activate. But don't forget you need your activation crystal. I did forget about that. So let's see, weak activation crystal. Make sure it's bound to me. Activate the guy. There we go. Now we can go ahead and place down this, and we'll throw down our simple catalyst, and then we should start to see this thing getting populated with all kinds of cool stuff. Look at that. And then what it's going to do is it's not only going to fill up the alchemical chemistry set with all the items, but it's going to start brewing it up and toss the output in the chest behind it. How cool is that? So if we look in here, we'll see all the items getting pulled out and populating this thing as well as it can. And we're pretty much running. Don't forget also that you're going to need some kind of blood orb in there for some of the rituals or some of the crafting, so make sure that's in there, and then you'll start seeing your swirls. And then as soon as the crafting is complete, it'll automatically dump the output item into the chest behind. Cool. There it goes. So automated alchemy and chemistry is pretty much really useful because what we're about to see, which is the custom spell creation, does use a lot of these components that are required, and you'll see that in just a moment. Alright guys, next up, it's time to look at teleposers. Teleposers are really cool. It's one of those blocks that does that kind of thing that I love. It allows you to transport blocks from one location to another. It basically allows you to swap the positions of two blocks in space. So let's take a look. The teleposer, as you can see here, requires the crafting of some gold ingots and some ender pearls, and then you're also going to need a teleposition focus. It's basically an ender pearl infused in a blood altar tier 4, and you'll get your basic teleposition focus, okay? So let me grab one of those because we're going to need it as well. All we have to do is set this up like so. So right here, we'll put one, and right here, we'll put another, okay? So what's going to happen is when I use this and set it up correctly, it's going to swap the blocks above it. Your basic teleposition focus, which is this guy right here, after you right-click it and bind it to your own player, needs to be bound to a destination. So simply right-click on the teleposer, and you'll see that now it's bound to the coordinates of that teleposer. Cool. And then we head over to this teleposer, and we drop it in the inventory that's inside here. So just pop it right in there. Awesome. Now, in a 1x1 block space above it, it's going to transport any items or blocks or whatever, really, that's above it. So the basic teleposition focus only does a 1x1 area. And I'll even throw some items in here to demonstrate that this works with tile entities, which is awesome. So apply a redstone signal, and it's not going to work. There we go. You have to apply a redstone signal to the one with the teleposition focus in it. Neat. Now, of course, if you wanted to apply a redstone signal over here to swap it as well, you just need another teleposition focus. Bind it to that block, and then put it in here. And then we grab ourselves another lever, and we're good to go. Now, this will only work, by the way, with a 1x1 block space above it. But that's pretty awesome, isn't it? Of course, there are higher versions of teleposer that allow more blocks to be transported. The enhanced teleposer, which is 10,000 more life points inside a basic teleposition focus and a tier 4 altar, gives you the enhanced version of this guy. This upgrades the radius to a 3x3. So let's go ahead and bind it over here. And we're going to remove this guy and insert this guy. And what we can do now is teleport blocks in a 3x3 area. So I'm just going to put down these cobblestone like that and right-click. Ta-da! It teleported it. Nice. Now, like I said, it's only going to do 3x3. And if you want it to be larger, there is a third tier, the reinforced teleposition focus. This guy requiring a weak blood shard, so not too expensive still at this point. This guy, again, needs to be right-clicked and bound. Okay, so it's bound to the teleposer over there. We'll remove this guy. This one can do 5x5. Nice. So we can bump this guy out one more set of blocks, and when we right-click, it'll grab the 5x5 area instead of the 3x3 area. And then the final one is the demonic teleposition focus. Need to get a demon blood shard. So of course, you're going to have to fight one of those elementals, which as we know is pretty brutal, and isn't even a 100% drop chance for the demon blood shard. But if you do, you'll have a teleposer that can handle a 7x7 area. So that guy, bind it, connected to that guy over there. Remove this one, insert this one, and there we go. Sweet. Look at that. Awesome. Oh, by the way, it also teleports player entities if you're inside the range. So as you can see there, I was standing there. So that's why I got teleported over. And it'll move mobs and all kinds of other stuff as too. Haha, that's cool, isn't it? So, entities, players, dropped items, whatever have you. And the range is 1x1x1, 3x3x3, 5x5x5, and 7x7x7. So yes, you can teleport the blocks that are above it. It'll grab those as well. Ha. It's so crazy watching my player get moved like that. when I'm not expecting it. But it's very cool, as you can see. So lots of neat effects that you can do with teleposers, moving items, moving players, moving mobs, whatever you want to do. And it'll even work with things like railcraft tanks, so multi-block shouldn't have a problem, that kind of thing. So teleposers, definitely neat. Alright guys, now for the final component to Blood Magic that I haven't yet shown you, and it's probably one of the more complex features of the mod. It's time to look at the custom spell mechanic. There's a way to create customized spells. As we saw in part 3 of the mod spotlight, there's some basic spells that you can create with the altar and the spell table just to do some basic and simple effects. However, to get even more complicated and some really advanced abilities, you can use the customized spell system. This customized spell system is extremely flexible and allows for a ton of different things. It's almost as complicated as the Ars Magica 2 spell system, though probably not quite as complicated. It's got pretty close to the functionality of it. So let's take a look at the different things you can do. First off, you're going to need a lot of different items to get started. Each of these different items are blocks that represent the different abilities that your spells can have and alter them or change them in different ways. To get started, you're first going to need to get yourself a complex spell crystal. What this requires is an unbound crystal that we guys saw earlier from our regular spell system, and then you're also going to need a couple weak blood shards, a diamond, and a piece of gold, and 5,000 life points from some kind of orb. Okay, so that's to get started with the basics. Okay, that's the item that you're going to use to cast your spells. Okay, so I want to get myself a new complex spell crystal because I've been playing with that one a little bit. There we go. Nice new blank one. First thing you want to do once you get it, right click. And that's going to bind it to the current owner, Direwolf 20, or, you know, if you guys are playing, it would be bound to your player. Next up, you're going to need, there's 4 different types of blocks, and I'm going to cover them here and show you some of the different ways that they work together. The first set of blocks are called paradigms. These are what's going to determine the type of spell that you're using, and it's always going to be the first block in your spell chain. Okay, 3 of them, projectile, self, and melee. And you can see them here. Melee aggregator, if you use this one as the first block in your spell chain, will wind up giving you a melee-based spell and ability. The other one is the self augmenter. This gives you a self-based spell. It's more like, you know, it works on your current player. And then finally, the particle generator is a particle-based spell that shoots a projectile. So those are the 3 paradigms, and those are going to be the first part of your spell chain. The next thing you need are effects. These are going to determine what effect your spell has. There's 4 of them. There is the Crucible of Fire, which gives your spell a fire type ability, the Ice Maker, which gives your spell an ice type ability, the Wind Generator, and the Earth Former, which are basically self-explanatory, just like the first 2, a wind and an earth-based ability. Now, these are going to be used to determine what your spell does. So if you use the Crucible of Fire, you can assume that whatever your spell is doing is going to have something to do with fire. Either setting mobs on fire or setting the terrain on fire or something along those lines. Next up, you're going to need modifiers. These change the effects to suit the needs of your spell, and there are 4 of them. You've got the default spell modifier, which makes the spell perform under its default circumstances. This isn't necessarily required, but it is optional or there for completeness. It forces the spell effect to have its default ability. You've also got the offensive spell modifier, which makes the spell offensive. So if you modify a fire spell with offensive, you can assume you're probably going to be setting a mob on fire. However, if you modify the Crucible with a defensive spell modifier, you're going to be defending yourself with fire in some way. And finally, there's the environmental spell modifier that amplifies the environmental effects of the spell. So basically that's going to make, you know, some fire in the environment or make the fire itself more powerful. Finally, you've got spell modifiers. Now there's 3 basic types of spell modifiers, and there are 3 strengths of them. There's technically 5 strengths, but the last 2 aren't implemented yet, so they currently don't have a way to be crafted, though they do exist in the game. And what we're looking at here is the Empowerer, the Dampener, and the Augmenter. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to modify the spell and make it either more powerful with the Empowerer. It's going to reduce the cost of the spell from your life points because, like everything, it's going to use up some of your Soul Network's life points to get going. The Spell Dampener will make that a little bit of a cheaper effect. And then finally you've got the Spell Augmenter, which increases the potency of the spell. And I'll show you some of the examples of how these work. Now there are 3 tiers of them. So you've got the Unstable Spell Empower, which is the weakest one one. As you can see, it looks like it has a bit of a wood frame here. And then you've also got the standard spell and power, which is the middle tier one. And then you've got the reinforced, which is the highest tier that's craftable this time. There's also going to be imbued and demonic, which aren't implemented yet, and are going to require a tier 6 altar, which also is not implemented yet. So those are the basic components of the spell. And if we look at the recipes for these things, we'll see that they're pretty complex. We're going to need some gold for your melee aggregator. You're also going to need a paradigm plate, which is going to be a bit of crafting right there. You're also going to need some kind of core, which requires a lot of alchemy type ingredients, as you can see. And finally, you're going to need an output spell cable here. Not too expensive, that guy. But each of these different things requires different components. So you've got a lot of cores going into this. Mostly the core are going to require some kind of alchemy. So you can see that there's a lot of alchemy involved here. That's why I suggested maybe getting the automated alchemy going before you start playing with this part of the mod. Now that we've kind of gone over each individual piece of the spells, let's see how we can build our very first spell. Now, as I mentioned, to get started, you're going to want to start with one of the 3 paradigms, the melee aggregator, the self-augmenter, or the particle generator. What I'd like to go with is the particle generator. There we go. So what this is going to do is going to create a particle or a projectile that we'll be shooting. Okay. Once you place it down, it's currently facing upwards. The output face of these blocks is very important because you need to link the output and input faces of each of the blocks together. When you right-click this guy, it's going to change the output face, as you can see. So the output face changes on a right click. The output face is always the one with these little 4 purple dots on it, or whatever color, depending on which one of these you put. But this guy right here is your output face. Okay, so that has our particle generator down. This spell is now going to be a projectile-based spell. Now, I went ahead and decided that I want to have a fire-based spell, so I'm going to put down the Crucible of Fire next to this. You could also do Ice, Wind, or Earth if you want, but I'm going to go with Fire because that sounds cool. Who doesn't love a little bit of fire magic, right? Now, what we have to do is connect the input face of the Crucible to the output face of the particle generator. So I placed it right next to where the output face is facing, and I'm going to shift right-click to change the input face. This here is the input face. You can see it shifted over to there. If I shift right-click again, now we've got it connected correctly. You can see that these things line up pretty well. Shift right click again and it'll now be facing the wrong way. It's facing out over here. So just keep shift right clicking until you have it lined up properly, and then you're in good shape. You'll also notice that the input face never is equal to the output face. To change the output face of this block, we can simply right click, and now this is the piece that's getting moved. So the input face is changed with a shift right click, the output face is changed with a regular right click. At this point we have a spell. It's ready to go. It's simply going to be a projectile based fire spell, and I've got some spiders here ready to practice on. In order to get this spell to work, we need to bind our complex spell crystal to the coordinates in the world of the first block in the chain. So simply right click on it, and you'll see that now its coordinates are set. Owner is Direwolf 20, and I'm ready to, if I have some life points in my soul network, oh yeah, I'm good, go ahead and cast this spell. Ta-da! It set the spider on fire, exactly as expected. Nice. So the basic ability of a projectile-based spell that is fire-based is to set the creature on fire. Neat. So you know what, fire spells are cool, but I've always been a little bit partial to ice spells. Let's take a look at this one. So I'm going to place down the ice maker instead of the fire spell, and I'm going to hook that up right there like that. So now the input is connected to the particle generator. Cool. Now what this does by default is to create a plume of ice blocks on hitting a tile. Like that. Neat. That looks pretty good. As I get ready to make sure I don't make too big of a mess. Ha, that's cool. Now that's going to simply create ice blocks. Not bad. But of course, keep in mind that it's on the tile that it hits, it's not going to convert the water into ice. Okay, that makes sense. Now, how about we modify this effect a little bit? Instead of it really doing something like create an ice block, I'd like this ice to be used in an offensive capacity. So let's find ourselves something offensive. Now, if we take a spell modifier and we modify it with the offensive ability, so there's an offensive spell modifier. I'm just going to place that guy right there. And what I'm going to do then is shift right click and get the input face again. With shift right click is always the input face. We're going to make sure that connects to the ice maker, and the output face can really be oriented anywhere. It's not connected to anything at this point. Now this is no longer creating ice blocks. As you can see, what this does is it actually casts a slow effect on any creatures it hits, so you can see that spider being slowed. Nice. But you know what? That slowing effect wasn't terribly impressive. I mean, yeah, it slowed the guy a little bit, but maybe I want to really slow him down. Let's modify this spell with a spell modifier. Let's take a look at, I believe it's the spell Augmenter that's going to increase the strength of the slow effect. Yeah, that sounds about right. So if we put down a slow Augmenter, now there's 3 tiers of Augmenter. If we take a look here, we can see there's the Reinforced, the Standard, and the Unstable. They all have the exact same effect on the spell, but depending on which tier you use determines how many of them can be stacked up. If you have the Unstable spell Augmenter, so for example this guy, you're only allowed to have 1 upgrade per spell effect that you're augmenting. So right now we're going to be augmenting the Ice Maker and its offensive rune. So we're just going to place it down right here. And like everything else, we're going to want to shift right click to get this guy to line up with the spell, and then right click to modify the output face. Now this should have a slightly stronger slowing effect. Oh yeah, look at that. That's definitely better. Now the thing is, you can't have more than one of these hooked up at the same time if they're both this weaker tier 1 version. It's just not going to work out too well. There we go. You can see there's really no difference in his slowing ability. However, if you've got the tier 2 slow ability, you can go ahead and place 2 of them down. So the spell augmenter there, you can have 2. Now the thing is, what happens is it looks backwards along the line to see if there's already one there before it applies the effect. So if you're being really smart about it, you could have the 1, the 2, and the 3 down in that order, and then you'll be able to have it work. So I'm just going to change this guy and his output face there, input face there, output face there, input face, and output face. Cool. So now this should be a 3-time boost to the slowing effect, and this guy should get really, really slowed. Let's see what happens. Come here, you. Ha! Look at that. Definitely, definitely better. Now you can see that that effect didn't really last too long. It wore off pretty quickly, didn't it? Really slow, really slow, really slow, and then it's going to wear off. Yeah, that's right. So if we want to increase the duration, we might want to modify this guy again with something like the Empower. The Empower for this particular spell increases the duration. And just because I don't feel like getting out of any eye, I'm going to go ahead and just use all tier 3s. Now, approaching a line over here, I don't want to run into this guy, so I'm just going to place them like this. So I'm going to set up the output face facing this way, and then this guy can kind of go along. And we'll just run him like that. So shift click to get him connected, and the output face again doesn't matter on the very end because it's not connecting to anything yet. So now this effect should last a lot longer. Take that, spider. Oh yeah, definitely lasting longer, as you can see, because I've just boosted the spell effect a little bit. Nice. Yeah, he's still slowed. That's cool. So as you can see, there's a lot of customization with the spells here. Let's take this from an offensive ice spell. Let's throw a defensive guy on there and see what that does. That sounds neat. So let's just hook up the input face there, and ta-da! It not only creates snow blocks, but it also freezes any water on contact. Cool. That's pretty neat. Nice. Alright guys, I think that's enough with the ice, even though there's a lot more effects that I haven't shown you. Let's switch this up to a earth-based spell though. So let's throw an earth former on there, and I'm going to shift right click at the inputs lined up. What the earth former does in its default state is destroy any blocks on impact and destroy the blocks completely. It won't drop any items. Aha. So it's a nice way to clear out terrain, but not actually get anything from the drops. Cool. And if we go ahead and throw some modifiers on there, for example, I believe that the power will increase the radius, and that'll just basically make it a larger area of effect. Pretty cool. Now, if we want, we could go ahead and throw either offensive or defensive or environmental stuff. Offense, when it hits an entity, will do something pretty cool, so let's give it a try. Where's my offensive spell modifier? Defensive, environmental. I know I've got an offensive one in here. There it is. Cool. Let's hook this up. And no, get out of there. Shift right click, get it tied in, and now this guy, as you can see, no longer digging up the terrain, but when it hits a entity like this guy, you can see it's going to dig out the block underneath it. Now, if that wasn't a spider, if it was something like a zombie, for example, it might work a little bit better. Haha, he's trapped. Nice. So it's a neat little ability. There we go. Now he's really trapped. Haha, take that. It'll only work on mundane blocks like dirt and stone. It won't dig up and destroy any of the ores that are under his feet. So make sure he's standing on dirt or stone or something like that, and he'll definitely fall into a hole. Very cool. Now, if we wanted to switch this out from offensive to maybe something like defensive modifier, what this does is actually pretty neat. Let's go ahead and place down some stone. This will no longer break blocks, but what it does do is kind of smash blocks, and what that does is it brings it down a notch. So it turns stone into cobblestone, cobblestone into gravel, gravel into sand. Neat. So it's a pretty nifty way to convert blocks. And again, you can upgrade this thing with a larger radius or that kind of thing. Pretty cool. Finally, the environmental version of this block, and I'm going to just add an environmental modifier to the earth former, is pretty neat, but also a little tricky to understand. What this does is it takes the area around the projectile and destroys and drops the blocks for anything found. So for example, as you can see there, it's kind of as it goes along, breaking the blocks nearby. And it's got kind of like, imagine a little box around the projectile that it's causing to break stuff. Pretty neat. Now, what you can do also is upgrade this. And by the way, this does actually drop the blocks, unlike in the other default mode where it just destroys them. This one actually does drop the items that you can pick up. Now, if you upgrade this thing, you're going to have some pretty cool effects. So let's take a look. We're going to probably throw, let's see, I'm using projectile. Let's increase the radius of the blocks. That sounds good. So for that, we're going to need the power upgrade. And that is the red one. So let's see, for spell power, cool. So if we hook this guy into the input, what we should now have is a larger radius. Now, what also happens is this thing starts to break blocks, remember, around the radius of the projectile, not necessarily where the projectile hits. So even though I'm shooting the projectile over certain blocks, it's hitting the ones around the projectile. Now, if you want it to be able to break more blocks in one go, you're going to want the next upgrade, which is the augment. And this guy is going to allow it to break more blocks in a row. So per cast, you'll be able to break even more blocks. So let's see. Now it's breaking many more blocks, as you can see. Pretty neat, right? So let's do something really cool now. This is where the things get really complicated. If we were to take the wind generator, for example, I'm going to replace the earth former with the wind generator. The environmental effect of a wind generator is pretty neat. I actually like it a lot. Let's go ahead and throw the wind generator on here, and what I'm going to do is hook up the input face there, the output face there. So now this is a wind generator with an environmental effect. What this does is pick up any items on the ground near the projectile and pull them into the player's inventory, right? So you can see as I'm shooting this projectile, it's picking up any items from a distance and pulling them right into my inventory. Pretty cool, right? You might be saying to yourself, all right, that's neat, but check this out. Let's do the following. I'm going to put this guy back onto the earth generator, okay? So let's get the earth former thing down there. We're going to hook him up to that, that, and that. Now we're back to breaking blocks, right? What we can do next is check this out. I'm going to make sure that this guy is connected in correctly. And I'm going to have the output face here. It doesn't really matter how you lay these out. I'm going to place a wind generator right here. And I'm going to set the input face to connect there, the output there. And then I'm going to place down another environmental spell modifier. And then I'll put down one of each of these just because. So we'll connect the input there, output there, input there, and output again doesn't matter. So what this will do when you cast the spell is it will cause the earth effect to occur, and then it'll cause the wind effect to occur. So let's take a look. Running over here. You can see as it's breaking the blocks, it's instantly picking them up and placing them in my inventory for me. So we've combined the two effects by, basically combining the two abilities in the chain. So you can chain multiple spells, multiple effects together all into one thing. You can have a ton of different things, and I don't think there's a limit to it, except, of course, how expensive it gets. Because, as you might expect, the more things that you chain together, the more expensive, from a perspective of life points, this spell becomes. Currently, it's costing me probably a pretty decent amount of life points. Yeah, it's costing me about, 300. That's not too bad. but I really don't have that complex of a spell going on. And remember, that's one cast that just breaks a few blocks and picks them up for us. If we had more modifiers on here, and if we had more of this stuff and more augments and all that stuff, you would probably pretty quickly rank up the cost of this spell. So there's a ton of abilities that I haven't shown you. Basically, each of the 4 different types of spells, ice, earth, wind, and fire, have 4 upgrades available. Default, offensive, defensive, and environmental. And then each of those abilities can be upgraded with either an empower or an augmenter, and then also you can throw in some spell dampeners if you want the cost to be a little bit less. So the combinations you can come up with are pretty crazy. There's spells that throw entities up in the air, there's spells that cause them to fall down really fast and take more damage from falling, there's spells that create lava underneath monsters. So a neat effect might be to use that earth ability that drops them into a hole and then creates lava in the air block below them. It's just tons of different combinations that you can come up with that make for a really customized and neat effect system. Now, by the way, all those different combinations that I just listed, all are related to the particle generator, or all the projectile spells. There's another whole set of options combined in different effects from melee spells. So if you want a spell that has a melee range that does fire offensive, it's going to be different than a projectile spell that's fire and offensive. As you recall, the projectile fire offensive spell lit entities on fire, right? Let's take a look at what the melee Crucible of Fire offensive spell modifier does. I'm just going to have to link my complex spell crystal to this new aggregator here, and then we're going to place down a sheep and see what it does. Doesn't seem like it does anything, does it? Don't worry, it's subtle. Well, it won't be subtle after a few seconds. Oh, hey there. That's right, it causes the nearby, or the entity to explode within a set period of time. It's really crazy. Now you can, of course, amplify this. One of these guys will reduce the duration, so I think it's about 7 seconds, but if you throw some of these guys, I think it's the augmenter probably, that will lower the time until they explode. So it might explode faster if we throw a few augmenters on there, and the empower will cause a larger explosion radius, damaging even more entities near to the one that exploded. But don't worry, it'll never destroy blocks. And if we were to put a self-augmenter with fire and offensive, this is a pretty cool effect. It actually gives the player a bit of a fire cloak. So let me make sure I'm using a spider because they don't burn in the daylight here. I'm going to cast the spell, Flame Cloak, for a few seconds there. Now whenever a mob attacks me, he's going to be lit on fire. How cool is that, huh? And again, you can upgrade these to be more powerful. So just think of the crazy number of combinations you can have. You always have to start with one type of spell, be it self or particle, but then you can chain a bunch of different abilities together. So you could have a spell effect that gives you a flame boost, there's ones that give you more health, there's ones that give you all kinds of different cool abilities, and you can modify them to have stronger effects or longer durations, and there's all kinds of different stuff. I mean, the number of combinations you can create with the spells is pretty ridiculous. So like I said, there's 3 different bases, there's 4 different spell types, there's 4 different modifiers for each spell type, and then there's all the upgrades, and chaining them together, it gets huge in the number of combinations you can have. Alright guys, with that, I think it's a good wrapping up point. I've shown you guys a lot of the cool stuff that's available in Blood Magic. There's tons that I obviously couldn't show you. If I spent the time showing you every single spell combination available, it would basically never end. It would be hours and hours and hours of Spotlight. So I've shown you the basics of how to create your own spell combinations, but it's up to you now to go ahead and start creating your own spell combinations so that you can come up with some really cool abilities and effects. Just keep in mind that other players can come by and mess with your spells. If they want to replace things, they certainly can. So for example, if I was a nasty player and knew that an enemy of mine had this setup, all I would have to do is come over here to the self-fire spell, remove the offensive spell modifier, and now when he casts it, it actually lights him on fire. Whoops, that doesn't sound like a good plan at all, does it? No. So you do want to make sure to protect your spells, especially if you're playing on a server where you've got some friends who like to play pranks on you. I think we all know that I do. Alright guys. So for now, this is Direwolf20 signing off. Hope you guys have enjoyed taking a look at this spotlight of Blood Magic. Part 4. Pretty cool abilities here. I've got a spell right now that launches the player up onto a pillar of ice and at the same time blows enemies away from me. It's a pretty nice defensive spell that I'm casting on myself and works really well. There's a lot to check out with Blood Magic, as you can tell. So hope you guys enjoyed taking a look. If you guys have any comments, feel free to leave them in the video. For now, this is Direwolf20 signing off. Take it easy!